The Battle of Samar marked one of the final major naval confrontations in the Pacific during World War II, just before Japan lost its remaining naval strength. It occurred on October 25, 1944, to the east of Samar Island, as part of Japan's desperate attempt to halt the advancing American forces during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Their objective was to stop the liberation of the Philippines by successfully drawing several U.S. Navy task groups away. A Japanese fleet of 23 warships, including the largest battleship ever constructed, launched a surprise attack on a small American unit of fewer than 13 ships, known as Taffy 3. Against overwhelming odds, the Americans held their ground in a remarkable last stand. By this stage of the war, Japanese air dominance had sharply declined after nearly 3 years of continuous fighting. Allied forces were steadily moving toward mainland Japan. In response, the Japanese Navy and Army sought new strategies to counter a foe that was both technologically and economically superior. One such method involved fortifying islands to withstand amphibious assaults. But this did little to slow the growing American superiority. The Japanese began deploying larger fleets in hopes of gaining decisive victories, as their weakening economy could not sustain further heavy losses without significant results. This necessity led Japanese leaders to mobilize their combined fleet for a major naval operation. On October 17, 1944, Operation King II was initiated to reclaim the Philippines. American, Australian, and Filipino forces landed near Leyte Island under the leadership of General Douglas MacArthur. The local population of nearly 1 million people also supported the effort. Meanwhile, Japan's first mobile fleet launched Operation Show, aiming to defeat the American forces through a decisive naval engagement. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's Northern Force was tasked with luring the U.S. Third Fleet away from the main area. If successful, this would leave the Allied landing forces exposed. Vice Admirals Takeo Kurita and Shoshi Nishimura were then to exploit the opportunity by attacking the remaining U.S. forces from the center and south, aiming to wipe out their naval and ground units. In the early hours of October 23, American submarines Data and Dace detected Kurita's central force moving through the Palawan Passage. This led to the Battle of the Sibian Sea. Kurita's fleet included several destroyers and cruisers, as well as the massive battleships Yamato and Musashi, the most formidable warships of their time. After being cleared to attack, the 2 American submarines launched torpedoes and sank 2 Japanese cruisers, including the 71,000-ton Musashi. The strike was completed with support from around 30 Grumman Hellcat fighters and several Curtiss Helldiver bombers carrying 500-pound bombs. Kurita and 600 surviving crew members were rescued by the destroyer Shimakaze, and Kurita was transferred to Yamato to resume command and continue westward. An hour later, Nishimura's southern force came under attack but escaped with only minor damage. However, this force would later face the American 7th Fleet's support units and was entirely destroyed in the Battle of Surigao Strait. Even though the southern group was wiped out and Musashi was lost, the Americans were unknowingly falling into a trap. Admiral William Halsey and 3 task groups from Task Force 38 had been diverted to engage Ozawa's northern force in the battle off Cape Engago. Halsey's force included 600 aircraft, 5 carriers, 6 fast battleships, 8 cruisers, and over 45 destroyers. In contrast, Ozawa's northern force had only 3 light carriers with around 100 aircraft, 2 battleships, 3 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. The Japanese hoped this sacrificial move would pull Halsey's fleet away from the central area, and it succeeded. Kurita, having feigned a retreat aboard Yamato, ordered his central force to continue through the San Bernardino Strait under the cover of darkness. The Japanese fleet went undetected and encountered only lightly armed American Taffy units, composed mainly of escort carriers from the 7th Fleet. The rest of the American fleet was far away, still engaged around Leyte Island. The Japanese assault focused primarily on the northernmost American group, Task Unit 7743, under Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague. Known by its call sign Taffy 3, this unit was not built to resist large warships. It consisted of 3 destroyers, 6 small escort carriers, and 4 destroyer escorts. Kurita's powerful force, in contrast, included the gigantic Yamato with its 18-inch guns, 4 battleships, 11 destroyers, 6 heavy cruisers, and 2 light cruisers. The Battle of Samar was one of the last major naval engagements in the Pacific before Japan's naval power was effectively destroyed. It happened on October 25, 1944, east of Samar Island. During the broader Battle of Leyte Gulf, the Japanese Navy tried to stop the American forces from liberating the Philippines. After successfully luring several American naval groups away, a Japanese fleet of 23 warships, including the largest battleship ever built, launched a surprise attack on a small American unit with fewer than 13 ships. Despite being heavily outnumbered and outgunned, the Americans managed to hold their ground in a dramatic last stand. By this time in the war, Japanese air superiority had collapsed after nearly 3 years of fighting. Allied forces were getting closer to Japan itself, facing a technologically and economically superior enemy. Japan's military had to develop new strategies. One approach was to reinforce islands against amphibious assaults, but this could not stop the growing American advantage. The Japanese Navy began to gather larger fleets, hoping that a few decisive victories would change the course of the war. Their struggling economy could not afford continued losses without results. So Japan activated its combined fleet to carry out a major operation. On October 17, 1944, the Allies launched Operation King II to retake the Philippines. American, Australian, and Filipino troops landed on Leyte Island, led by General Douglas MacArthur. The local population, nearly 1 million strong, also supported the liberation. In response, the Japanese Navy launched Operation Show, aiming to destroy the Allied fleet. Vice Admiral Ozawa's Northern Force would try to draw the U.S. Third Fleet away. If successful, the remaining Allied forces would be vulnerable, allowing Vice Admirals Kurita and Nishimura to attack from the center and south, targeting American ships and troops around Leyte. Just after midnight on October 23. 2 American submarines, Data and Dace, spotted Kurita's central force moving through the Palawan Passage. This led to the Battle of the Sibuan Sea. Kurita's fleet included destroyers, cruisers, and the massive battleships Yamato and Musashi. These were the most powerful warships of their time. The American submarines attacked and sank 2 Japanese cruisers, including the 71,000-ton Musashi. The sinking was completed with the help of dozens of American aircraft, including Grumman Hellcats and Curtiss Helldiver bombers. Kurita and 600 survivors were rescued by the destroyer Shimakaze, and he was transferred to Yamato to continue leading the fleet westward. Not long after, Nishimura's southern force was also attacked, but received only light damage at first. However, later that day, it ran into American forces and was completely destroyed in what became known as the Battle of Surigao Strait. Even with Musashi lost and the southern force wiped out, the Japanese plan still worked. Admiral Halsey and 3 groups from Task Force 38 had taken the bait and moved north to engage Ozawa's northern force at Cape Engago. Halsey's fleet included 600 aircraft, 5 aircraft carriers, 6 fast battleships, 8 cruisers, and more than 45 destroyers. In comparison, Ozawa's force had only 3 light carriers with about 100 aircraft, 2 battleships, 3 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. The Japanese had intended it as a diversion, and it succeeded. Kurita, appearing to retreat aboard Yamato, had in fact turned his fleet around. The central force passed through the San Bernardino Strait at night without being detected. With Halsey's fleet far away, the Japanese now faced only lightly armed American escort carrier groups from the 7th Fleet. The rest of the American fleet was still focused on operations near Leyte. The Japanese strike focused on the northernmost American group, Task Unit 7743. commanded by Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague, and known by its call sign, Taffy. 3. This unit was not designed to battle large warships. It consisted of 3 destroyers, 6 small escort carriers, and 4 destroyer escorts. Facing them was Kurita's force, which included Yamato with its massive 18-inch guns, 4 battleships, 11 destroyers, 6 heavy cruisers, and 2 light cruisers. The situation quickly turned into a desperate struggle when Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague was alerted by friendly reconnaissance aircraft about the powerful Japanese fleet approaching. He understood that a direct clash was unavoidable. Just one shot from the Yamato was enough to destroy any ship from Taffy 3, and the Americans' most powerful weapons were the Mark 12 5-inch guns mounted on their destroyers. By 6:50 a.m. on October 25, 1944, Kurita's fleet had visual contact with Taffy 3. The Japanese formation advanced at 30 knots and immediately opened fire. Salvos from Yamato exploded near the American ships, sending massive columns of water into the air. The destroyers of Taffy 3 laid down smoke screens to help the group retreat toward Leyte Island and to obstruct Japanese targeting. At the same time, American pilots aboard the escort carriers prepared for a desperate counterattack as their task force zigzagged through turbulent waters under heavy fire. Aboard the destroyer USS Johnston, Captain Ernest E. Evans realized the Japanese would soon start destroying American ships with ease. Determined not to let them reach Leyte Island without resistance, Evans ordered his crew to charge the 23 Japanese center force. Without any warning, the 15,000-ton USS Johnston broke through the smoke and surged toward one of the most powerful enemy fleets ever assembled. Evans hoped to buy enough time for the rest of Taffy 3 to escape. The destroyer moved swiftly, dodging fire and attacking any enemy ship within reach. Overhead, Avenger and Hellcat aircraft flew dangerous missions through smoke and anti-air fire. When the Johnston managed to close in on the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano, which was 7 times its size, Evans ordered all 5-inch guns to fire. Within minutes, 200 rounds tore through the cruiser's upper structures and damaged some of its gun mounts. The Johnston then launched 10 torpedoes that tore through Kumano's hull, nearly breaking the ship in 2. Evans had used up all of the ship's heavy firepower in this single assault. As they withdrew at top speed, the crew continued firing their remaining ammunition. Soon, the Johnston was struck in the boiler room by 16-inch shells, cutting its speed in half. Another hit ignited the anti-aircraft ammunition, causing an internal explosion, while a final blow destroyed the bridge and radar system. Despite being crippled and heavily damaged, the Johnston remained on the front line with the Japanese fleet in full view. Captain Evans, wounded and missing 2 fingers with shrapnel wounds on his face, continued to command his ship and shout orders. Before the Johnston sank, the destroyers Hull and Hiramon, along with the escort ship Samuel B. Roberts, joined the chaotic battle. They passed the burning Johnston and charged the enemy. Evans and his crew turned back one final time to make a last stand with their fellow ships. The rest of Taffy 3, including the vessels Dennis, John C. Butler, and Raymond, also joined the attack. The few remaining American aircraft continued to strafe the enemy, targeting gun positions with their machine guns. By 8:30 a.m., the crew of USS Hull abandoned their ship. 10 minutes later, USS Gambier Bay began to sink, although most of its crew survived. With all their torpedoes spent, the remaining American destroyers continued to dodge enemy fire and shoot their last rounds. At 8:50 a.m., USS Samuel B. Roberts was hit critically. By 9:45 a.m., the Johnston was attacked again by the light cruiser Yahagi and several destroyers. Captain Evans gave the order to abandon ship. He and his crew escaped, but he was never seen again. In a shocking turn, the Japanese center force began to retreat. Although they had faced a much smaller American force, they lost 3 cruisers and had another 3 heavily damaged. Believing that more American reinforcements were on the way, Vice Admiral Kurita called off the attack. Taffy 3 suffered more than 800 deaths and 750 wounded, and 4 of their ships were sunk. The Japanese lost over 500 men. The outcome was a remarkable American victory, with a lightly armed group of 13 ships managing to fend off a superior Japanese fleet of 23 warships. This battle effectively marked the end of the Japanese Navy as a serious threat. Its surviving ships remained in port for the rest of the war. Captain Evans was never recovered after leaving the Johnston. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. His citation noted that his courageous leadership during the battle would serve as a lasting inspiration to all who fought with him. The clash turned into a desperate fight for survival as Admiral Clifton Sprague grasped the full scale of the threat. Friendly reconnaissance aircraft had spotted the powerful Japanese fleet, and it was clear that contact was unavoidable. Yamato, with a single shot, could sink any of the American ships, while the best the Americans could offer in defense were 5-inch guns on their destroyers. At 6:50 a.m. on October 25, 1944, the Japanese fleet came into view. Moving at high speed, they immediately formed up and advanced. Yamato opened fire, and its shells sent towering columns of water crashing down dangerously close to the American vessels. In response, the destroyers laid smoke to mask their retreat and disrupt enemy targeting. Pilots on the small American carriers prepared to launch, fully aware they were flying into near-certain danger. Aboard the destroyer, USS Johnston, Captain Ernest E. Evans recognized that his group wouldn't survive unless they disrupted the enemy formation. Rather than retreat, he ordered his crew to attack the vastly superior Japanese fleet. Johnston surged through the smoke and headed directly for the enemy. Evans intended to delay the Japanese long enough for the rest of the American force to escape. As the destroyer zigzagged and returned fire, aircraft from the American carriers roared overhead, strafing and dropping bombs through a sky filled with smoke and anti-aircraft bursts. Eventually, Johnston closed in on the heavy cruiser. Despite being greatly outmatched in size and firepower, Evans gave the order to open fire. The crew unleashed a barrage of shells that severely damaged the cruiser's superstructure and gun emplacements. 10 torpedoes followed, one of which tore through Kumino's hull and nearly broke it apart. Having used all his heavy weapons, Evans ordered a retreat while the crew continued firing with whatever ammunition remained. The Japanese responded with brutal force. A 16-inch shell struck Johnston's boiler room, slowing her drastically. Another blast hit the anti-aircraft magazine, causing a violent explosion, while a final shell disabled the bridge and radar. Even as the ship burned and listed, Johnston held her position. Evans, bleeding and wounded, refused to quit. Though 2 fingers were gone and shrapnel had torn his face, he remained standing, directing his crew. Just before the ship went under, reinforcements arrived. The destroyers Hull and Hiraman and the escort ship Samuel B. Roberts pushed forward into the fight. Rushing past the stricken Johnston, Evans and his crew turned back one last time, determined to continue the fight alongside their fellow sailors. Other ships from Taffy 3, including Dennis, John C. Butler, and Raymond, also entered the fray. Overhead, the remaining American aircraft carried out more attacks, raking Japanese ships with machine gun fire. At 8:30 a.m., the crew of USS Hull had to abandon their ship. Just 10 minutes later, USS Gambier Bay was sinking, though her crew was saved. Even after all torpedoes had been fired, the American ships kept maneuvering and firing. At 8:50 a.m., Samuel B. Roberts took a critical hit. By 9:45 a.m., Johnston was again under attack, this time from the cruiser Yahagi and several destroyers. Evans gave the order to abandon ship, and he and his crew escaped into the sea. Then something unexpected occurred. The Japanese center force, which had inflicted heavy losses, suddenly began to withdraw. Despite overwhelming strength, they had lost 3 cruisers and seen 3 others disabled. Vice Admiral Kurita, fearing additional American reinforcements, made the decision to end the engagement. Taffy 3 suffered deeply, over 800 dead, more than 750 wounded, and 4 ships lost. The Japanese lost more than 500 sailors. Despite the odds, the Americans emerged victorious. A small group of modest ships had held off one of the largest naval forces ever assembled. It was the final blow to Japanese naval power. Most of their remaining ships never left port again. Captain Evans was never seen after abandoning Johnston. He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. His courage and leadership during the battle left a lasting example for all who served.